Hi, I'm Dr. Amy Robbins, and welcome to Life, Death, and the Space Between podcast. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and medium, and here we explore life, death, consciousness, and what it all means. Today on the show, I have another solo episode, and this comes out of questions that I've been getting, as well as just me wanting to explain to you all a bit about consciousness. So I talk a lot about consciousness, mindfulness, awareness. I sort of use those words interchangeably. And I did an Instagram live about this, or not an Instagram live, an Instagram about this a while back, but I wanted to revisit it because I think it's so important. I also have a little quiz on my website. It's just a fun little thing I put together if you want to take it and see how conscious you are and where you fall in the realm of 3, 4, and 5D consciousness, which I also don't think is that dissimilar when we talk about unconscious, semi-conscious, subconscious, and conscious. So we are going to start there. We're going to start by talking about the unconscious. And this is really where my learning began as a clinical psychologist and what Freud brought to the table around this notion of unconscious and the unconscious feelings, thoughts, urges, and memories that are, when we talk about the unconscious, that's what we're talking about, that are stored outside of our conscious awareness. So they're often repressed, they're often automatic. Sometimes we're not even sure what they're about. And the best way that I can describe this is if you ever have an argument with someone in your life, but the argument does not seem commensurate with what happened or commensurate with your relationship with them, sometimes that could be an old unconscious pattern that has existed that is getting played out in our other relationships. So one of the things that I often talk about when I am working therapeutically with someone is trying to understand what are those unconscious experiences we have, those feelings, those thoughts that have been there from a psychological perspective early in childhood, from a spiritual perspective, perhaps past lives that are being carried out. So this is, again, how I start to integrate and look both psychologically and spiritually at what's happening. And then we have the subconscious, and the subconscious is just below the surface. And so I often think of that like a submarine. It's just there. Sometimes it peeks its head out. Sometimes it drops back down. But we can begin to access our subconscious through dreams and just other ways that we can start to notice some of these feelings that are coming above the surface, thoughts that are starting to come above the surface. And when you can work with those, that's when you can start to change them. When I think of semi-conscious, I think of our ability to access some of our ability to start to access some of the unconscious mind through processes of meditation or hypnosis, regression. We can really start to tap in both to our unconscious mind, but also to these higher dimensions of ourselves, these higher versions, the soul. What I often say is like how when you're sitting in a meditation and you're clearing out a lot of the muck that is our conscious thoughts, you can really start to get to some of what lies beneath. And then when we think of conscious thoughts, I think of that as the awareness, the awakeness, the aliveness to being, to every moment-to-moment experience. So you are really living moment to moment. You're conscious of what's happening. Think about when you drive somewhere. And when you don't know where you're going, right? You're paying attention. You're paying attention to the landmarks. You're paying attention to, do I need to turn here? Almost like even when we're first learning a new skill, learning to ride a bike, learning to walk, although babies probably don't remember that. But when we're learning new skills, learning to drive, and everything is very purposeful. We have to be paying a lot of attention to what we're doing. And then it becomes sort of unconscious for us, right? We just go from point A to point B. We're not even thinking about it. And the conscious portion of this is really being aware. So being aware in the moment, being aware of what's happening, being aware of your thoughts, your feelings, your experiences, being aware of your senses. Are you able to taste, hear, smell, see, and touch what's happening in the moment? Or is life just sort of passing you by? And I think we all have experiences where we are really conscious and really aware and very mindful, and life seems bright and vibrant and we're taking it all in. And then we have other experiences where that is absolutely not the case, and we're sort of walking unconsciously through life. And I am guilty of this as well, but part of my thinking and where I want to help move people to is being more conscious in their life, being more aware. This is what I do in my therapy. This is what my hope is to do in the program, is to help people become more aware of a lot of those unconscious patterns, be it from childhood, from experiences they've had as young adults or older adults, and also perhaps from past lives and feelings that are being stored and carried with them, with you all, that you need to work through. So now we're going to shift a little and we're going to talk about the different states as it is termed in spirituality. And people talk about 3D, 4D, and 5D and beyond, although I'm not well versed in what's beyond, so I'm not going to speak to that here. But when we think of a 3D state of being, I sort of connect this a little bit to unconscious state of being. You're ruled by your mind. There's your ego. There's a sense of scarcity, like there's not going to be enough. There's struggle. There's competition. There might be joy, but there's also the pain of life that just feels really, really difficult to manage. And there's not a desire to go and dig deeper. It's just sort of, it is what it is. You're accepting of things the way they are. Sometimes in this, there can be more of like a victimization mentality, that love is conditional, and it just generally feels heavy. So when we think also vibrationally, we're thinking about the heaviness of a 3D consciousness. And when you're in a 3D consciousness, it's really hard to connect to these higher vibrations because the feelings and emotions are so heavy. And I often talk about this a lot with grief work, is when people are wanting to connect in grief work to their loved ones, it's very difficult to connect when we're in a very heavy place of emotion. It is not a judgment. It is not you're bad for being in that state. It's just recognizing that that's where you are, and how can we move you and shift you towards higher states of consciousness where life can seem easier, more in flow, you are more conscious and aware of the feelings you're having. Those feelings don't overwhelm you. They don't impact your relationships with others. They don't impact your relationship with yourself. You just notice that they're there, you accept them, and you move through them. So when we think of 4D consciousness is really this gateway, and you're starting to move into a healthier way of being. So that might include a healthy lifestyle, a healthy diet. I don't talk a lot about this in my work, but I do think that it's all connected. When we are not eating sludgy, yucky, processed foods, that energy can move more freely through us, and that also increases our vibration. And you're beginning to recognize that you're more than a physical body, and that you have the power to co-create your reality. So you can use affirmations, you might start using crystals or vision boards, but you're noticing that your intuition is starting to expand. And again, this is not linear. So sometimes we go back and forth, but too often, like anything, we might be in a state of 4D consciousness for a while and then move into a 5D consciousness, maybe during a meditation or a spiritual transformative experience. And then you move back to a 4D consciousness, and then maybe you have something that's really difficult and you're back in 3D consciousness. So again, this isn't about judgment. It's about being human and noticing how you're moving through these experiences. And then when we move to a 5D consciousness, this is where we have those awakening moments. And I want to be clear, moments, because many of the people I've spoken to on the show, myself included, have had these moments where it just feels amazing. You feel light. You feel connected. You feel unconditional love. You feel like you just want to serve others. The world is a beautiful place. It's an amazing time to be alive. Everything that's happening is happening as it should. This is not, at least for me, maybe some people have this experience, this is not a sustainable place where I live very often. I sometimes have moments where I flit in and out of this, even throughout the day, but it is not, for me, a permanent state, although something that I aspire to do more often. And I think that or aspire to be there more often because it's blissful. And that's where our vibration starts to really create our reality. You notice signs, synchronicities, everything that happens makes sense to you. You have a sense of your higher purpose, what you are here for. I say your higher essence, how you're tapping into that. So this is really what how 5D consciousness is defined. There's also a general sense of trust. And for me, this was a big shift. I was someone, you've heard me talk if you've listened to the podcast, that was very, very anxious, that felt like I needed to control everything. Some of you who are listening might say that is still the case. I think I'm much better, but it still creeps in every now and again. But even in those spaces, I try to trust that even when I'm uncomfortable, that there is a sense that things will work out and that they will work out for my highest and best self. And you can do that too, but you have to let go of a lot of control. So I hope that all of this makes sense to you all. Again, I have a quiz. It's super fun. It's not scientific. It's just a fun little quiz to take to see where you fall in this sort of 3D, 4D, 5D consciousness. So you can take that quiz on my website at dramyrobbins.com. You can always drop me questions in my DMs on Instagram at dramyrobbins. You can sign up for my newsletter. You guys have heard this all before. So just connect with me. I love hearing where you are, where you're wanting to shift to. And again, my upcoming program, Live Your Life Backwards, is going to address all of these pieces to help move you towards experiencing 5D consciousness more often in your life. Like what you heard today and want to hear more? Wondering what comes next and what it all means? Head over to Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or anywhere you get your podcasts and hit subscribe. Also, if you could take a minute to rate and review my podcast, I would really appreciate it. Stay tuned as we continue to explore life, death, and the space between.